Okay, we're going to thank you very much, everybody, for joining us. And of course, a very special thank you that Rabbi Anemer is joining us and the Kahanas. It's a big honor to have you with us. Um, Unfortunately, this is not the first year I've said this, but anything that we do in memory of Rabbi Anemer at a time where there are difficulties for Klal Yisrael, how could we not begin with Tehillim? I'm sure we all have memories of Rabbi Anemer being passionate about the power of Tehillim. Um, I know for myself, there's no way, however much of a rush I'm in, there's no way I can imagine folding my talus or my tefillin while we're saying Tehillim. And I absolutely think of Rav Anemer during whatever was going on. He was so passionate about it. You're beseeching Hashem that everything should go well. How could you be doing something else? So we'll just to start off, we'll say Perek Tzadi Aleph 91. People are muted, but you can say it along with me. There's a merit that everything should be well in Israel. Yoshev b'seis Yon b'tzeil Shaddai Yistalnon. Umar ladunai machsi u'metzudasi Elohai avtach bo. Hu yatziocha mipach yakush mitaver havos. Vevroso yosech loch v'sachas knafav techset sino v'sochera mito. Lo sira mipach aloyla mechetz yauf yomam. Midever bofo yaloch miketev yashud soroyim. Yipol mitzidcha elef urvava miminecha ilecha lo yigosh. Rak beinecha sabit v'shilumas v'shoim tireh. Ki ato Adonai machsi elyon samtamonecha. Lo sunei lecha ra'ov nega lo yikra bo lecha. Ma'av yitzav elach lishmorcha b'chol dorochecha. Al kapayim yisa'uncha pentigov bo'evan raglecha. Shachal b'fesen tidroch tirmos kefir v'sanin. Kivi choshak v'falteyu asagveyu ki yodashmi. Yikreini v'neyu imo anochi v'tzara achal tseyu v'achabteyu. Orech yamim asviyeyu v'yarehu v'shuasi. Achenu kol beis Yisrael hanasunim batzara v'shivya ha'omdim bein bayam v'bein bayabasha. Makom yirachim aleihem v'yotziyei mitzara l'rvacha me'afelu v'yora mishibu l'giyula. Shtabag olav zman kariv v'nomar amen. Okay, you see a Mishnah in front of you now. Do you see that? Yes. Okay. Okay. So thank you everyone for joining us. Today is the 15th Yahrzeit of Morenu, Harav Gedaliah ben Zev HaKohen Zeichet Tzadik Livracha. Common minhag in Klal Yisrael still in Mishnayos. Mishnah is the same letters as Neshama. We'll just learn 5 Mishnayos to just spell out his name, Gedaliah. 10th parak of Baba Basra. Get pashut eidav mitocho. A standard get that husband writes to his wife. The witnesses are signed within the document. Mukushar eidav me'achorav. There was something called a get makushar. Literally, it means a tied-up get. It was interesting. The rabbis were concerned. We know, of course, that if a Kohen divorces his wife, he's not allowed to remarry her. So the rabbis were concerned that a Kohen would divorce his wife in anger and then not have the opportunity to remarry her. So they made a dynamic that the way the get would work is you would write a line of the get and then fold it over and sew it, and write another line of the get and fold it over and sew it. So it's just a more drawn out affair to make sure that a Kohen really wanted to be divorcing his wife. So in any event, the witnesses that sign on what's called a get makushar, they sign on the back of the fold. Pashut shekasvu edav me'achorav u'makushar shekasvu edav mitocho. If there was a standard get and the witnesses wrote on the back of the document, which is not the place they would sign on such a document, or there was this sewn up get and the witnesses wrote on the face of the document, which also was not the correct way to do it, shneim psulim. Either way, it will be invalid. Reb Chanina ben Gamliel Omer mekushar shekasvu edav mitocho kasher b'rei sheyachol laso so pashut Reb Chanina ben Gamliel argues, or Reb Chanina ben Gamliel says that if witnesses signed on the face of that special sewn-up document, it's all right because you could have done it that way if you wanted to. Reb Shimon Gamliel Omer HaKol K'Minhag HaMedina. Reb Shimon Gamliel says it's all based on whatever is normal for the place. The way Reb Shimon Gamliel is understood is if it was normal in the place to do a get makushar and someone instructed that they do a get makushar, then it's invalid for the witnesses to sign any other way. But if it's not normal in the place, then it would still be valid, like what Reb Chanina ben Gamliel says. Okay, next Mishnah, the letter Dalid, from the beginning of Masechah Sanhedrin. Dinay Mamanis Beshlosha. So there's all kinds of different based-in contexts. So a regular monetary dispute, you would have three people for a panel. Gzelos v'chavalos, Gzelos v'chavalos, a rabbinic panel having to do with a question of theft or a question of damages. Bishlosha, you would have three people on the panel. Nezek v'chatzi nezek, different types of damages or half damages in the case of a short time. Tashlume kefa v'tashlume arba v'chamisha. Double payment and 4 and 5 times payment. These are special fines that are levied when a person steals. Bishlosha, you would have a 3-person panel for that. Ha'ones v'amefata v'amotzi shemra. There's unique halachos in the Torah if a man rapes a woman, if a man seduces a woman, if a man has false accusations about a woman. All these things, Bishlosha, all these things would have a panel of 3 to adjudicate the case. Divrei Reb Meir, v'chachamim omrim, and the chachamim say, motzi shemra b'esem u'shlosha. Their opinion was that if you had a case of motzi shemra, that there's an accusation that a woman who presented herself as being a virgin had been unfaithful to her husband, then actually the entire case has to have a basin of 23, which is the number needed for capital cases involving capital punishment, because if it's found that the allegation was correct, then there could be capital punishment for the woman in question. So therefore, you would start the case with a basin of 23. Okay. The next Mishnah, Lulav v'arava, Shisha v'shiva. How many days would a person have the mitzvah of Lulav in the Beis HaMikdash? Or how many days would there be a mitzvah of Lulav in the Beis HaMikdash? And how many days would there be a mitzvah of positioning the Aravos around the Mizbeach? This is not something we exactly do today, but they would do it in the Beis HaMikdash. So it would be either 6 or 7 over the course of Sukkos. Why would it be either 6 or 7? Because normally, if Shabbos fell out on a day of Sukkos, they wouldn't do Lulav. Even in the Beis HaMikdash, they wouldn't do Lulav that day. The one exception was if it was the first day of Sukkot. If it was the first day of Sukkot, being that there's a Torah mitzvah around the world, then even though it's Shabbos, they would do Lulav that day in the Beis HaMikdash. So therefore, depending on when Shabbos was, it would either be all 7 days of Sukkot they would do the Lulav, if Shabbos was the first day, or if Shabbos was any day other than the first day, they would do it on 6 days of Sukkot. Ha'halel v'asimcha, saying Hallel, saying a full Hallel, by the way, over Sukkot, and the mitzvah of partaking of the meat of Korbanos over Sukkot. That was for Shmona, 7 days of Sukkot, and Shmini Atzeres. Sukkah v'niso chamayim. We're not talking the diaspora, we're talking the land of Israel, where there's clarity. They would only sit in the sukkah for 7 days. And the mitzvah of pouring water on the Mizbeach would happen each day of Sukkot, also 7. Achalil, chamisha v'shisha. The musical accompaniment in the Beis HaMikdash of the celebration with the pouring of the water on the Mizbeach would either be 5 or 6 days. Why 5 or 6? They wouldn't play instruments in the Beis HaMikdash on Shabbos or Yom Tov. So if the first day of Sukkot also fell out to be Shabbos, so there was one day they wouldn't play, but they'd play all the other 6 days. If the first day of Sukkot was a day other than Shabbos, so there'd be 2 days that they wouldn't play on Shabbos and on the first day of Sukkot. Okay, moving on to the Mishnah of Yud. Makipurim, Aser ba'achilo v'shtio v'rchitzo v'sicha v'neilas asando v'tashmish hamita. The prohibitions of Yom Kippur: we're not allowed to eat or drink, we're not allowed to bathe, we're not allowed to anoint ourselves with oil, we're not allowed to wear leather shoes, nor marital relations. Va'melach va'akala yirchatzu es pneihem. A king is allowed to wash his face to look presentable, and a newlywed woman is allowed to wash her face. V'achaya, and a woman who's recently given birth is considered a chola, and it's considered not well, so therefore tinolas asandal. She is allowed to wear leather shoes. Rabbi Eliezer. These three exceptions are the position of Rabbi Eliezer. The Chacham Osrin and the Chacham prohibit all three of them. And finally, the Mishnah of Hey, Haroem Makom Shenasu Bo Nisim Yisrael. If a person is in a place where miracles have happened for the Jewish people, there's a special bracha that they're supposed to say. Omer, Baruch Shasa Nisim Lavoseinu B'makom Hazeh. Praising Hashem for doing miracles for our fathers in this place. Makom Shenekra Mena Avodah Zarah. If a person is in a place that there had been Avodah Zarah and the Avodah Zarah was eradicated, Omer Baruch Sha'akar Avodah Zarah Me'artzenu. There's a special bracha that a person makes for thanking Hashem for uprooting the Avodah Zarah from this place. I've made the comment before in past years, but it's striking how many of these Mishnayos, which were just really randomly selected, were things in which Rabbi Anemer was involved in the halachic observance of the shul, of the broader Washington community. It's an interesting thing to think about. If I may, before I cede the floor to Sarah Maslow, I just want to share one recollection. I probably shared it with some of you before on the topic of get. As some of you might know, Rabbi Anemer Zichron Livracha was the esteemed Mesader Gittin, the officiant of divorces in the Washington community, not just in the shul, not just in Kemil, but in the greater Washington community for decades. Just to give you a sense, there's plenty of rabbis who can officiate at weddings and things of the sort. We really only have the most distinguished Talmidei Chachamim act as a Mesader Gittin needs to be, that people all over the world will be confident that this is a person who didn't make an error. And obviously, our community was extremely fortunate that we could rely on someone of Rabbi Anemer's stature. Some of you might know yourselves or from stories from your children, Rabbi Anemer actually would sometimes use students in the yeshiva in the get process. You would need witnesses and this and that. And so he could always walk into the base medrash and get a few students. And it was an interesting education. It was an education about how the get worked. It was also an education about how to interact with all types of people. People not only from the Orthodox community would come, people from the broader Washington Jewish community would come. And sometimes I would get called in for these things as a student in the yeshiva. As I'm sure is not a surprise to any of you, Rabbi Anemer was always extremely organized with this. He would have contacted the people ahead of time. Earlier in the day, he would come to us and say, I'll have you come in at such a time. I'll come and get you. Everything was very orderly because Rabbi Anemer was a person of Seder. Rabbi Anemer clearly was a person of much order. It's funny how you remember things. So I was sitting in the base medrash and Rabbi Anemer rushed in very agitated, and he kind of rushed over to me and one or two other fellows. Come with me right now. It's not the way Rabbi Anemer normally interacted with us at all, and it was just really sort of bizarre. And we came into his office in the yeshiva, and there was someone there for a get. And once we were all there, he proceeded and is very much in command of the situation and kind and considerate, etc. So after the woman left, Rabbi Anemer apologized to us. He said, "I'm sorry, it was so quick when I called you in." This was before Pesach. And Rabbi Anemer said, I had been going through my home office. And you know how it is before Pesach, there are piles of things and this and that. And as I was going through, I came across a get. It happens sometimes. It happens every now and then involved in getting. I'm not the Mesader Gittin in our community. I'm just the guy who calls people up. but every now and then a husband comes and he wants to do a get, and he leaves the get with the beis din. And normally you call the wife, and the wife comes, and sometimes the wife doesn't come. Sometimes the wife doesn't return the call. Sometimes the wife says, "I'm not interested." Whatever. It's a free country, And so he said, so I came across this get in a pile of things. And it was a get from a long time ago. And, imagine how busy Rabbi Anemer must have been before Pesach. But he said to himself, let me just call this woman again. You never know. I'll be very, very candid with you. The odds of me and most rabbis that I know just out of the blue calling the woman again, especially right before Pesach, are very, very slim. if they ever call, we tried to reach out to them. They didn't contact us. If they ever call, we have it. So Rabbi Anemer said, so I called the person, and she called me back, and she said she'll come right over. So I didn't want to waste 1 minute. In other words, she showed up. I was so surprised that she showed up. So I needed you to come and do it. It's there are much more magnificent stories to share that could easily be shared about Rabbi Anemer. To me, it's a very inspiring story. It's a story of just trying one more time, just trying again, and never writing anyone off. And I think actually it's a very narrow story, but I think probably many of us, if we think for a moment, have had experiences in our own lives, or we've seen Rabbi with other people, that he never wrote another person off. And if there was something that you could push a little bit more, try again, he did. And I think much of the success that we see in the shul, in the yeshiva, in the community that he was so involved in so many different ways, really are from those two aspects of his character. I am very grateful, and I think we'll all be grateful to Mrs. Sarah Holstein Maslow for agreeing to share some reflections with us. For us, it's this afternoon. For her, it's tonight. I want to first of all say that some of you probably know this, but Mrs. Maslow is an absolute regular on this annual Yahrzeit gathering. It's always a pleasure to be able to see who's here. And even though it's different time, she's always there. And she generally has a picture that she sends from the Beis Hakvaros, from the cemetery of Rabbi Anemer's Matseva. There's many people on here that had unique relationships with Rabbi Anemer. Mrs. Maslow had it in so many different ways. Mrs. Maslow was part of the first yeshiva girls class of the Yeshiva of Greater Washington, if I'm not mistaken. Mrs. Maslow and her family were very connected to the Rav and the Rebbetzin Tzibata L'chaim. And years later, after having lived in Buffalo, Mrs. and Dr. Maslow came back to the Silver Spring area and were longtime members of our shul. And Mrs. Maslow even served as First Lady of Young Israel Shomrai Emunah. And Mrs. Maslow, you're going to have to unmute yourself, but I'm going to put the spotlight on you. And we thank you very much for taking the time to share some reflections with us.
Yes, the president is sitting over there just waiting to go to Marav. I just want to tell you, I live here in Yerushalayim, Ir HaKodesh, and I'm very grateful and blessed to be here. Tonight at 8 o'clock, which is in a half hour from now, there is going to be a siren for Yom HaZikaron. Tonight is the beginning of Yom HaZikaron. Tomorrow night at this time will be the beginning of Yom HaAtzmaut. And this year, for Yom HaZikaron, I just want to tell you wonderful people from Shomrai that we lost 4 grandsons from people in our community within 5 blocks. And I'm sure you know all of them, the wonderful people: Linzer, Zimbalist, Siegel, Debbie Wildman, and Weiser. And I can share with you, I recently just saw Wisers and Zimbalists just in the street accidentally. And Baruch Hashem, they're all doing well, but their hearts are heavy. But anyway, so keep them in mind. Yehi Zichram Baruch, and we should only know Besarot Tovot from Eretz Yisrael and for all of Klal Yisrael. I hope I don't cry. Okay. Hi, Mrs. Anemer. I love you always. First. Okay. And Barbara, I love you too. Rabbi Anemer came to Washington when I was 6 years old. He started out in Riggs Park, where Shomrai Emunah was originally, and then we called him the Rabbi. That was his name, the Rabbi. And he was very involved in the community. And my earliest memories was what a beautiful couple that Rabbi and Mrs. Anemer were. Mrs. Anemer was really gorgeous, as she is today. In 1962, my family moved from DC to Maryland suburbs. Since the Northeast DC community was moving, my mother came to the rabbi to encourage him to move. Soon after that, he moved to Whittington Terrace. The shul was in the rabbi's house. They put up a shower curtain, and it was a mechitza for one person. And I was the lucky one person. I was 12 years old at the time. Things grew, and they built a little shul, and davening there was very special. I became the Shabbos youth leader for 7 girls, and I was 13 years old, and my relationship to those girls has continued till today. I'm like their big sister. Right, Ati? Okay. My mother and my brother taught in the shul's Hebrew school. I became the Anemer chief babysitter. I got to know the Rabbi's Zaidi, whom we called the Zaidi, and he was truly a living tzaddik. He used to help me with the Anemer children and some of the nephews that now live in Silver Spring when he was only 102 years old. I knew all the Anemer family and Mrs. Anemer's wonderful parents, Rabbi and Mrs. Bagley, also Zichronam Livracha, also tzaddikim. It came time to start a yeshiva high school in 1964. The rabbi knew to come to my parents to have them send me as the first student of the yeshiva high school. Rabbi Anemer was my carpool and my Rebbe. Our connection was so heartwarming for me. It was being part of their family. I learned so much in school, but so much more from that special home exposure. Baruch Hashem, that same feeling is with me my whole life. Every event in my life, the rabbi was involved in a close and caring way, from happy times and sad occasions. Rabbi Anemer was a real Avi Mori. When I got engaged, I had to bring David to Rabbi Anemer to be approved. When my kids got engaged, I had to bring their future spouses to him to approve. And Baruch Hashem, he liked them all, so that worked out well. Some people thought the rabbi was very strict, but he was just very wise. My father passed away, and at the funeral, I asked Rabbi Anemer if I could say Kaddish for my father at the funeral and on. I expected Rabbi Anemer to say a firm no, but instead he said, of course, any Kaddish, not loud, but every Kaddish is an aliyah for the neshama. And so I continued to say Kaddish for him and for my mother, and I even wrote an article for the shul about the meaning of that, which I can't find. When my family moved from Buffalo, New York in 1989, there was no question we'd live in Camp Mill. In my first Shabbos in shul in the Arcola building, I was greeted warmly by the rabbi, and I was talking to him in my familiar palsy-walsy way, which was normal for me. After all, I kept in close contact when I lived in Buffalo. Rabbi Anemer was my posek and yoetz even then. Someone came over to me and asked me, how can you talk to the rabbi that way? No one does that. I felt kind of bad, and I thought maybe I appeared disrespectful. I told the rabbi, and he laughed and said, of course I wasn't disrespectful. I told the rabbi, and there were times in high school I could have been accused of being disrespectful, but the rabbi always thought it was funny. Eventually, although I toned down my interaction a little, people understood we had a special relationship. I once asked the rabbi a shaila on something, I don't even remember, and he gave me a psak. And then I learned from a friend who had the same shaila and got a different psak. And I was just curious. And so I went and asked the rabbi, why did you give a different one? So he taught me this as an adult. He said that when I give a psak, no two people are the same. Heve dan lekav zchut. He said, I need to look at the person's knowledge and emotional situation. That is my responsibility to be honest. It was a huge lesson for me. He was the most honest and respectful man who understood his community. Two incidences that show how he understood our connection. One was on Shabbos HaGadol before Pesach. I heard in shul that baby carrots didn't have a Pesach hechsher. I prepared a ton of the baby carrots, and it was in my chicken soup in the freezer, and Pesach was Sunday night. I think it was. I got really upset, and I made my husband David go to the rabbi's house on Shabbos afternoon. The rabbi laughed hysterically and told David to calm me down, and the carrots are okay. And he said, only Sarah would be that frum. David was the president of the shul, so I had to be that frum. The last story was the only time I ever was afraid of the rabbi. We were planning to make Aliyah, and I needed the rabbi to write a letter to Israel proving that I was Jewish. I was afraid to ask him because I was afraid that he might not approve. I told him, and there was a pause, and I was waiting to hear him say, how could you do that? And I was shaking. I remember I was really shaking because I didn't want to disappoint him. And he said, that is so wonderful. And I'm going to give you a bracha that it should be very good for you and your family. That felt like a big hug. That was 6 months before the rabbi passed away. And 6 months later, we made Aliyah. That was the greatest bracha since we have been so very happy and fulfilled in Israel these 14 years. And many of you have visited us and know how nice it is. Yesterday, we went to the rabbi's kever, and I spoke to him in my teenage way. And Ubasof, I asked him to be a Melitz Yashar for my family, for Eretz Yisrael, the DC community, and for Klal Yisrael. I then went a few steps over to Rabbi Yashuv's kever. Rabbi Yashuv is Rabbi Anemer's neighbor, and for sure Chavrusa in the Yeshiva Shalmala. And I made the same request. Every step of the way, Mrs. Anemer, my wonderful Imi Marasi, impacted my life, and I love her very much too. And I'm very proud to be able to share with her all the things in my life still today. Yehi Zichro Baruch. And hi, y'all.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Maslow.
5 minutes, not bad, huh?
That was excellent. That was excellent. By the way, Rabbi Anemer was also very into people keeping to scheduled allotted speaking times, and he would be very pleased, I'm sure. I just want to show again, if you can see it. This is the picture from the Matseva that the Maslows were kind enough to send, and Mrs. Maslow by the Matseva. Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody, for joining. Again, thank you to the Rebbitzin and the Kahanas for joining us. And may the numerous individuals and families and institutions within our community stand as a great zchus for the neshama of Morenu of Gedaliah ben Cohen, and Tibadal Havdu ben Chaim l'chaim. May it be a continued source of nachas to Rebbe Anemer, who we certainly understand and recognize has a significant role in all of his and their accomplishments, and may it be a source of schus and bracha for the entire Anemer mishpacha and for our community. Thank you very much for joining, everybody. May the neshama have an aliyah. Take care.
And